Hello and welcome to the channel, and I am here for a discussion video for you guys. Now for this discussion, this is actually a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for quite a bit now, so I'm just now getting around to it, of course, and I'm definitely glad to finally be getting around to talking about this subject. But the subject of this video is taking music recommendations and just getting into more bands, just in general, this idea. Now, I am somewhat passionate about this subject, and the reason for that is because, well, if you didn't know, most of the bands that I'm into are because of recommendations. You know, most of the bands that I'm into have been recommended to me. So, yeah, and it leaves me wondering, like, how people even do it without taking recommendations. I'm just so sick and tired of hearing people complaining also that they're tired of listening to the same thing over and over again, yet they're not taking band recommendations. Like, they're not, you know, taking people's recommendations more seriously. And if they do, they, you know, listen to the first 5 seconds of that band's song and then, you know, leave it behind and never return to it again, basically, is what they do. And that's the furthest that they'll go with their, with taking music recommendations. And it's quite an unfortunate thing, I think. Because, once again, you never know what you're missing out on, and you really got to give certain music a chance. You know, so don't complain about listening to the same thing over and over and getting sick of it if you're not going to actually take recommendations. You know, the fact that, you know, you listen to the same 4 or 5 bands, that's on you, okay? That is your fault. I mean, if there's a reviewer, for example, like me, if you follow music reviewers, people that talk music like I do, if I talk about a band that maybe you're not familiar with and you're looking to check out more bands, then check out the band that I'm talking about in the video, you know, especially if I give this certain album or band a good review, like if I say good things about this particular band. The reason I have to bring that up is because, well, one time I did a stream and someone said to me that the reason that they stopped collecting CDs was because no CDs as of late have piqued their interest. And I'm going to tell you the same thing I told this person that actually said that to me. I just personally think you need to get into more bands. You know, actually take recommendations. And for the love of God, who cares if the band I recommend is, you know, I guess, far from what you already listen to, I guess. You know, if you, for example, only listen to metalcore and melodeath, like those are your two main genres of rock and metal, basically, like if that's like the majority of what you'll listen to and you won't check out a band unless it's in metalcore or melodeath, you definitely need to break from that idea, because not only will it cause you to get into more bands, but it will also cause you to open up your mind a little bit to other styles, and then it'll lead on to the next thing, and then after that you go on to the next thing, you know? And, you know, when people give me crap, and, you know, when certain people say that, you know, I'm stuck in the past because of my music taste, I mean, I think that this is maybe one of the biggest reasons why there are some people that I know that won't take my recommendations anymore. I mean, there were people that I do know that once have taken recommendations from me, but now just don't. And I think it's because of, within these past few years, I've been having a preference to, you know, these older styles of rock and metal from the 70s and the 80s. And one thing that I have noticed following this idea is I've noticed that there's some people that won't take my recommendations unless, you know, it's a newer band. If it's a band that came out within the last 2 decades, then sure, they'll take the recommendation. But if it came out any time before then, it's not worth their time, apparently. And I think that is the most delusional mindset that you can have, or at least one of the most. And if you're not familiar with this specific style of metal or rock that's being recommended to you, then try to open up your mind to that style. Did you think that I was always into prog, for example? Like, I wasn't always into Dream Theater. There was a time where I didn't really like Dream Theater whenever I first checked them out. And then a couple years later, I checked them out again, ended up really liking them. So, yeah, that is definitely something to consider. So taking recommendations is important, you know, and you don't have to just stick with, you know, your generation of music, I guess. You know, you're not going to maybe get into these bands overnight. it takes time, but you got to keep giving them chances. You can't listen to the first 5 seconds of, a song from a band that's being recommended to you and then just walk away from them, never return to them again. I mean, really give these bands chances, because again, you never know what you're missing out on. I mean, you might look back at some of these bands and think, why didn't I get into these bands sooner? Because these bands have been recommended to you and you were just, being ignorant towards them. And, there's some people that might think, oh man, I wish I would have gotten into this band sooner, and this person probably could have, since maybe this particular band was recommended to them like a year ago, and they were just, dismissive towards them. So this is why I feel like it is significant, and also good for music listeners to take recommendations for sure. And it's okay to not just stick with, just 4 or 5 bands. I personally couldn't do that. I couldn't just stick with 4 or 5 bands. Honestly, I don't know how I did it back in my youth, because that is something I did do back in my youth. I don't know how I did it. I mean, looking back, I'm like, how did I do it? Then again, I look back and I think, how did I do and think a lot of things, So that's just how it is, I guess. But yeah, if you are someone that, has a hard time taking recommendations, maybe the familiarity factor is something that bothers you a little bit, like, well, I want to only stick with whatever I'm familiar with. Well, just give these bands chances, try to go into them with a good mindset and all this and that, and I do know some people that will only stick with what they're familiar with, like maybe they will only stick with music that their parents were into, for example. I definitely know some people that are like this. There's some people that might think, well, if my parents weren't into it, it's not worth my time, which is another ridiculous mindset to have, because that is one of the good things about us, like people like me and other people that do what I do. You see what I'm saying? We recommend bands, we help people check out more bands and get into more bands, because again, they may never know what they're missing out on. So in that case, we may feel like that we're failing a little bit in this category, I guess. And it's not to say that you should be a fan of every single band that you've been recommended, because I don't want people to take this that way, all right? Because I know some people might twist my words or whatever, but no, that's not what I'm saying. But don't be that way with every single band you check out. And if you're someone who's a fan of one particular genre of metal, and you're exploring prog because it's being recommended to you and you're not familiar with prog, again, don't just dismiss it just because oh, it's not Melodeath, oh, it's not metalcore, it's prog. Wrong idea. So yeah, I mean, there's bound to be something that you'll be recommended that you will like. All right, that is something to keep in mind. So with that being said, I'm done with this discussion video. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.